out. Can you hear me? If I walk out there, will you be able to hear me? I don't know.
Sure.
Okay, we'll see. We shall see. Welcome, everyone, to the February 1st. Again, we're meeting in person and we're meeting on Zoom, and we have a few people in the audience, and we have more people on Zoom, and that's great. The more we can hear, the better. For those privileged few that are here, I hope you picked up a ticket so that you can have a drawing. If you've got the drawing, that you'll have a chance to race up here. The normal routine is, if your ticket is, you'll find that out at the end of the meeting, so you have to stay. We'll find out what the prizes are right away, but then you'll find out whether you are one of those 6 winners. Now, we have 6 prizes. Somebody made a contribution tonight. Thank you, Suzanne. And I will talk about what those contributions are. And we will read the numbers off. Whoever gets here first. So you want to sit close, right? Whoever gets here first is first choice. And we have a unique, we usually give out books. So we have 5 books, and 4 books, and a set of recorded CDs. And so let me go over those. First, we'll start with the recorded CDs, The Underground Railroad, how appropriate for Black History Month and for Ralph's speech tonight. So Ralph's got his fingers crossed that he gets that CD collection. And then we have contribution, The 12-Week Year. I wonder where we've heard that from. That's a very important book for leadership. And so there's a chance if you want to be effective in your leadership. And Connie says, because this is Valentine's month, we have 2 books here to help people understand, and it's D'Angela's Secrets About Men Every Woman Should Know.
They like they need help.
I'm just hoping she would read this before she gave it to my giveaway. And then The Female Brain. So there's a
female brain.
Yeah.
Another persuasion, there's your chance to learn about that. And we have, this is the month of Lincoln's birthday, so we have Bill O'Reilly's Killing Lincoln. So those are your choices, and we have one last choice. And I don't know who's a golfer in the audience, but you have a brand new sweatshirt that I don't know if it fits me or what. Extra large.
Extra.
Oh,
2 extra. Double extra large. If you know somebody who plays golf and they still manage to have to wear double extra large, that's the present for them. So there's your choices for the evening. Okay. Now, to make sure that I don't forget anything, I'm going to take care of those things that I would normally forget to do right now. Let's take care of the first with the somber moment. I don't know whether we did lose one of our qualified speakers in the last short period of time. I think it's counted a week or 2, and that would be Michael Owen, who's an excellent member of our qualified speaker group. Wonderful accent from England, and always a humor and a great evaluator when he was coming in first and helping to evaluate speakers. And we will certainly miss him. We were let know by Mary Hamlin, who was also one of our district qualified speakers, and a past district governor under the name of Mary Machete around 20 years ago. And she made us aware of his passing. So we'll thought to be with him. I want to thank the people that have made this evening possible, and it starts, of course, most importantly, starting with Sandy Emilito, who was able to make our past district governor, who was able to make arrangements with the VA hospital, make sure we have the facility. So we want to thank the facility. The wonderful, great facility. Those of you who have been here before know how great it is. And those of you here now, even more so. You're still asking people to come in the north gate and wear a mask while you're going through the halls, and then you're pretty much, I guess, okay once you get in here. So we'll thank them. Thank Rob Gunneman, who without his technological expertise, we would be talking to ourselves. Thank Sharon Kenty for putting the flyer out that goes out in the district newsletter. Without that wonderful flyer, you might not know what was going on, because I wouldn't be able to do it, that's for sure. Thank the district for their support of continuing to support Speakers Bureau, because I firmly believe it is, I use the term the jewel of the district, because it's something that gives both ways. It helps publicize Toastmasters we've sent out over the last year and a half, over over 50 speakers to Kiwanis Clubs, Rotary Clubs, and so on to other programs. And so I think they provide a base of Toastmasters when they go out to speak. And I will talk a little bit more about one of those presentations later on. Thank Marilyn for being here to be our timer. She keeps us within our parameters. And if I'm not mistaken, our first speaker will be speaking for, what was it? I wrote it down somewhere.
Let's say 20.
Let's say 15 to 20 minutes.
Somewhere in there.
Okay, so Marilyn has that.
We'll see what happens. I think she
Let me,
does.
read the introduction since I was.
Read-
Before I go any further, I do want to mention that in the next few months, we're trying to find some spaces in our schedule. We expect someone who's already committed to doing a qualifying speech in each of the next 3 months. We do have room for more than that. So if you're working at QS, you're already QS working with someone, please let me know who that is. And if you're a person who's interested in becoming a QS, also get back to me. And so I think my phone number is always in the flyer that goes out, so you should be able to do that. You can chat on the phone, and you can talk to Connie. She's well-informed design about what's going on with speakers.
Are you going to use this? Or are you going to stand up
I'm going to stand there.
We have three qualified speakers, three really great speakers, three speakers who have made some good contributions to this Speakers Bureau. Randy has been around, this is my own stuff I'm making up now, stuff that he wrote, because he's always been one of the best evaluators when you're seeking to become a QS. In fact, I think he sponsored more QSs than anybody else in the room, so, or any of our other qualified speakers. So he's an excellent coach for that purpose, and has been a very active member of this organization, this Speakers Bureau, for quite a while. Okay, Randy Powell, our next speaker, keynote speaker, author, and success coach, Toastmaster for 10 years, GTM, qualified speaker at the
Extraordinary performance. Extraordinary.
Extraordinary performance success systems, the blueprint for success, and the envision success
Brand.
title, the opportunity of a lifetime. Here's your opportunity of a lifetime. You're Randy Powell.
Oh, thank you. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, I'm happy to be here. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much. I haven't been here in a very, very long time. It's good to see some wonderful new faces, and it's also good to see some old, not old that kind of way, but you know what I mean, especially Ralph, you know. Ralph said he's been around a long time, and I hope that each and every one of us are around for a long time. Very sad to hear about one of our qualified speakers. However, we're going to just move right along because they tell me I got 2 minutes to say something about 25 minutes. But I gotta start off with this particular statement here. If you can finish this statement for me, it'd be wonderful. To know me is to, say it again, to know me is to love me. Okay, but I got a question for you. Can you know someone? Can you really, truly ever know someone without knowing where they've been? Food for thought there. You know, it's been a great track record, a great journey for me personally, being a Toastmaster. And I got to tell you, it hasn't always been a bed of roses, and that's for sure. So I had a birdie land on my shoulder not too long ago, and this birdie and I had a conversation. Well, mostly the birdie was speaking to me because I've become a listener. I've learned to listen a lot better than I did when I was growing up. And this little birdie said to me, every time I hear you, I hear a little bit of something that I didn't know. And I thought about it a minute, scratched my head, and that sunk in just a little bit. And then that little birdie landed on my shoulder again, sometime later. And you know, sometimes we don't feel like knocking or answering the door when it knocks. Sometimes we just don't want to open our eyes or get up and check the door. And so this little birdie, thank goodness for this little birdie, landed on my shoulder. This time it was the other shoulder. And this little birdie said, you know, that was interesting what I heard about you, but every time I hear something, it's a little bit more about you. And I got to thinking about that and what that person was actually trying to say. You see, it wasn't really a bird, it was a person. And this person had heard me talk several times, present several different times. And the lesson there is we really have to listen to what people are saying. Because if we listen really, really well, that just might lead us down the pathway, no pun intended, towards experiencing the opportunity of a lifetime. Now, it may not be that one thing, it could be more than one thing, but listening is really, really important. What I found out as I really paid attention was that I want people to love me. Don't we all want people to love us? To at least like us? And on top of that, they say that in order for people to do business with you, they got to know, like, and trust you. Well, how can they know, like, and trust you if they don't know you? So I scratched the other side of my head. And what I decided to do was start looking back over the past and really try to understand my own story. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because I was focused for years, especially when I became a Toastmaster and I figured out what my purpose in life was. What I decided to do was worry and stress and take care of others, mentor others, because I always thought that was the way. And I'm not saying it's not, but how can people learn to love you if they don't know your story? So I'm going to take you back to 1954 AD. September 1st was my born on date. Now, we all have born on dates, and that was my born on date. Yes, I'm 68 years old, and I feel pretty good. Lost a few pounds recently. But that was just the beginning, and of course, I didn't have anything to do with that. When I was 18 months old, they tell me I had spinal meningitis. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and this babysitter of ours called my mother up and said, Mrs. Brown, you see, my mother's last name is Brown, my last name is Powell. You can figure out that she was divorced and remarried. And so what happened was they didn't have any way of really helping me. But the doctor said, well, we can try this medicine because worst case scenario, he's not going to make it anyhow. And she said, go ahead. So I'm here. And I'm grateful for that physician, that medical team. But I was 18 months old. Then when I was 10 years old, I love water, love the lakes, and we lived in Clinton, Massachusetts. See, I was an army brat, I'll say it. And Fort Devens, Massachusetts was right there. We lived in Clinton, Massachusetts, and there was a lake out there, and I loved laying out in the inner tube. But one special day, I fell asleep in the inner tube. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever fallen asleep in the inner tube, you probably slipped through it like I did. And all I remember doing is fighting, and I was going down the third time. Thank God my brother was on the beach with his best friend, and his best friend just happened to roll over and see me going down the third time, and here I am, still here. That was at 10 years old. Well, you know Franco Harris from Pittsburgh Steelers just passed away, right? Well, Franco and I had the pleasure of going to the same high school that Franco Harris went to. And Carl Lewis lived in Willingboro, New Jersey, but we grew up about 10 miles from Willingboro in a little town called Mount Holly, New Jersey. So again, the Army got me down near Fort Dix, New Jersey. We lived in Mount Holly, New Jersey, had a wonderful high school and a great, great sports program. Well, when I was 14 years old, I couldn't wait to get to high school. I had been playing football for a long time. You know, I had a football career at age 14. My brother, my oldest brother, he was 21 years old. He was about to get married. He was living in New York City. Graduation came, 8th grade graduation came, and he came from New York City to see me graduate from F.W. Holbein School. Well, what happened? He came from New York with these shoes. They're almost as nice as these shoes I'm wearing tonight. And I fell in love with those shoes, and he promised me he would send me a pair from New York City. Now, something you don't know about my brother, his name was Kenneth Powell. And he always said, don't ever make a promise that you don't expect to keep. Well, 2 weeks went by and the shoes didn't come, and I started getting nervous. Started worrying about my shoes. But that was the wrong thing to worry about. I'm out with my friends, I come home and I see all these cars around the house. I just thought maybe my mom had some friends over. Lo and behold, I walk in and my mom's boyfriend, who happened to be a flight engineer, his name was Stack, nickname was Stack. He was a smart man. He grabbed me by the collar, took me out back, sat me in his 1967 Thunderbird and said, I've got something to talk to you about, son. And I said, what? He said, we're not getting out of the car until you get yourself together. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And the next thing I know, he tells me that Kenny passed away. And I sat there and it didn't even sink in. It didn't sink in for probably 10 or 15 minutes because I was in shock. You see, Kenny was my best friend. My mom was divorced. She had a boyfriend. He was a nice guy. He was a great guy, actually. But Kenny was my big brother. I looked up to him. He was a bookworm, smart, but he had to work for everything he got. And I knew one day I was going to be just like him. I wanted to be a computer technician just like he was. He was working for Digital Computers in Maynard, Massachusetts, and then they moved into New York City. He had hit the big leagues and found a girlfriend, and he was getting ready to get married. 21 years old. We were sitting in that car. Stack told me, he said, your brother died from a brain hemorrhage. And your mom's going to need you now more than ever. You're going to become the man of the house today. And you're going to have to go upstairs where she's at. And you're going to have to be with her. So, long story short, obviously, at 14 years old, I was shocked, et cetera, et cetera. It changed my life because I had a younger brother. I became the protector that year because all I could think about was taking care of my mom and my little brother. So I went upstairs and I laid on my mom's floor next to her bed as she cried and wept all night long. And the years passed. Things went pretty well for a while. You heal, you never forget. You're reminded, but you never forget. But that might have been one of those things that created in the future that I didn't know the opportunity of a lifetime. Because I had to become a man that day. And my brother to this day still thanks me for taking care of him. And I never thought about it too much. My brother happens to be a multimillionaire. He's worth millions. I never even thought about it till about 6 months, 8 months ago, that he was doing that well. I knew he was doing okay, but I remember a time when he struggled and struggled and struggled as an entrepreneur. And I remember him telling me one time he didn't think he was going to be able to pay his rent. And so I'm going to fast forward right now to the age of 19. In the age of 19, I went in the military. And I had a great career in the military. But 2 years after being in, I was taking a friend of mine to meet a cousin on my way to Philadelphia. He was going overseas in the Army. And we were in a rear-end collision. Car hit us 65 miles an hour, and we were sitting still on the 95 South in Jersey. We hadn't made it across the bridge to Philadelphia. And the car took off. And the only thing that I can tell you is God is great. Because we never hit the car in front of us. The car spun to the right and went off the bridge, but we didn't fall off. There was a tree that hit my 76 Monte Carlo dead center, stopped us. I was going to introduce my cousin to a lady who I thought would be a great match. I was a matchmaker, I thought. Well, a week later after that accident, and I took care of her. She was in shock. We got her medical treatment, all that. I went to get out of bed to go to work, and I was in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of my mom's house because I had told her when I got my job, I was going to rent that apartment. And I did. $150 a month. I was big time. I made more in my first year than the high school teachers who were teaching me. I crawled out of the bed because my legs weren't working. And I was paralyzed for 9.5 months. I got back to work in the 10.5 month, but for 9.5 months, I didn't have the use of my legs. The good news is I worked for the government. You see, I was a civil service employee, but I was in the reserves. So I had a good government job, or I would have probably lost my job. Fast forward, after that, I had the opportunity of a lifetime to move to California. So I moved to California because the military, the reserves out here were changing planes, and I had the experience in the F-4 Phantom that they were moving into. We worked out in Ontario, and then eventually we moved to March Air Force Bases, which is where I retired. Fast forward, I left there and went to work for Northrop. After 22 years in the reserves, 19 years civil service, I got out and I went to work for Northrop Research and Development. And I finished up at the B-2 division. And I'll tell you what, it was a great career. It was only 3 years. It was fast-paced, working on black programs. And then went to several other Fortune 500 companies. Fast forward to 2013. I worked for the smallest company I'd ever worked for, a NASDAQ-traded company. Have you ever worked for a big company then go to a little company? It's a massive change. And we used to talk to people and communicate in big companies. And I went to a small company and the person working in a cubicle over there didn't know what was going on. I couldn't understand it. But I lost my job in 2013 after 30 plus years of being an exceptional performer. And at that time, Cheryl Rouse was my coach because I had joined Toastmasters. And she said, don't quit your day job until your speaking can handle it. And I said, okay. But the day I lost my job, I got really, really depressed after I realized it really happened. And eventually my wife and I drove to San Diego, met with Cheryl, and I told her I had lost my job. She said, good. You've been freed up to do what you're supposed to be doing. I didn't know what to say. I looked at my wife, Susan. She looked at me. We drove home. And for a while, I was depressed and mixed up and confused and felt worthless. But here's a life lesson. Your job is not who you are. Let me say that one more time. Your job is not who you are. Another opportunity to create the opportunity of a lifetime. So I got back in the saddle. Now, I will tell you, I did go into treatment, but it was a Toastmasters treatment. The help of my wife, my closest friends, and Toastmasters, I got back on the horse and got on with life. And ever since then, the opportunities have just been abound, have just flown over. So I want to share with you why I think that is true. Not just because of Toastmasters, not because of Cheryl, not because of all the trainings, the certifications, the accreditations in coaching, not because I'm a #1 Amazon best-selling author. I don't even talk about that stuff. It's because of the relationships that I have had the opportunity to create, and they're so powerful and meaningful that it's just unbelievable. So when you open up and share your story, you begin the process of letting people know something more about you than the surface stuff. And the relationships get stronger when you open up, and you never know what's going to create that next opportunity. Some of the people here tonight on the screen in front of us know exactly what I'm talking about. It started here. I got to travel with Dana Lamont And that was an opportunity of a lifetime. Then I met Craig Duswalt. Eventually, after following Craig for a long time, joined his mastermind. And Craig has introduced me to hundreds of different people across the nation. I got the opportunity to fly from coast to coast and get paid for flying and get paid well. And then started coaching. And the reason coaching came was from speaking. And then I realized I'm really working to add value to people's lives, and it's starting to take hold. And it's been the biggest, greatest joy ever since that day when they said, I'm not on your team anymore. You're not on my team anymore. We got to let you go. So be careful when you speak up. You do have to speak up, but know that it could cost you. It could cost you when you speak up. But as Dr. Myron Golden says, you got to stand up, you got to speak up, and you got to show up if you expect the world to take notice of you. The most important thing that I can share with you as we leave is that right now, all I do is help people create the courage to get unstuck. And that starts with knowing your purpose. Purpose leads to passion. Passion leads to your power. And your power leads to the courage that you need to face whatever it is in life that you're facing. We all have been stuck. You might be stuck on something right now. It could be a small thing. It could be a really big thing. But you need the courage to admit that you're stuck and then ask someone for help. Because most people are afraid to ask for help. And you would be amazed how many people I have said, can you help me? We're doing a masterclass right now, starting the 17th. We've done one. There's a 3-part, and I've got some awesome people just showing up as guest speakers because of the power of relationships. And those things are creating the opportunity of a lifetime. So I say to you, figure out what your purpose is. Make sure that you understand that that purpose is going to be filling some big shoes, and have the courage to recognize if you're stuck, there's people out here that will help you, but you got to ask. You got to ask for help. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will create the opportunity of a lifetime. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Randy. Help us think of 3 things. Are you hear me? Rob, is that okay from here? I couldn't help it. No, okay, I'll go back here and be a good boy. And it's my son. Anyway, I couldn't help but think of 2 things. We have 3 people online looking at when the president, you will have to, you will see the rest of you will take some involved. So it gives you a good example of how you need to polish your presentation in order to qualify. We've got 3 people in the audience that will do that. The second thing I noticed, we have a member sitting here in the online audience who's been a Toastmaster for 35 years, district got way up high in the accomplishments, and has been an international director, has a theme that is Toastmasters is his mental vitamin. All I can think about is that listening to Randy speak tonight. So definitely a mental vitamin that gets us all to think about those opportunities and not to pass them up. Our second speaker, as I mentioned, is also a past international director and a past district governor for District 12. And he's going to give us a speech on his field of expertise. He just retired from the Health Department for Riverside County. I think he's number 2 or 3, whatever it is, but was struggling through that whole COVID time, and is our co-chair for Speakers Bureau, and been a very great supporter of Toastmasters, great supporter of all of the district, great supporter of individual members, and also a great supporter of one of our guest tonight, Raina Canali. So she said that he made it a point to go and present her with her DTM when she got her DTM. So we're so glad to see you back, Raina, longtime member and competitor from 797 and other clubs in the district. And glad to see you here. And we now know we have legal representation because she left us to become a lawyer. And when she was in my debate club, we had at one time, we had 3 people who were lawyers in the club, and somebody else came in, I think it was Bruce Campbell, and we said, I don't know, let me check. I think we have a legal limit on how many lawyers we'll allow in the debate club, but that was a joke, of course. Our next speaker, our co-chair, past district governor, qualified speaker, DTM, is going to give us a speech on flu, disease trifecta, flu, RSV, and COVID. Flu, RSV, and COVID, the disease trifecta. Michael Ozier.
Greetings, Speakers Bureau. Before I get started, I want to tell you my many Michael Owen story, who just died yesterday. Now, Michael Ozier, we often were at the same Toastmaster events. We would get each other's certificates by mistake. So I'd always say, hello, Michael O. And he would go, hello, Michael O. And that was our greeting for all those years. And I always appreciate that because I didn't know any other Michael O's. So he had a sardonic wit, very dry, sarcastic, but he had that British accent, get away with anything. And that's my memory of Michael Owen. So much to share with the group today. Let's talk about this for a second. Wow. If I can find the share button. Can you guys all see my background? All right. So I call it the tridemic, RSV, flu, and COVID. If the diseases aren't bad enough, why do we have 3 diseases to worry about this year? So what is this? We call it a tridemic. Maybe that's a media situation on the tridemic. And we'll talk about both RSV, influenza, and then finally COVID, because I have thoughts on everything. What is RSV? Have you guys heard about it before this year? Don't ask me how to say it. Respiratory syncytial virus. Predominantly, when I've seen it, it's only in young children and older adults. Now, there's no real cure for it. It's by supportive care, meaning you give them oxygen and you give them medications so they can stay hydrated. And most people do well with supportive care, and it goes in phases. Now, nationally, I looked this up, average about every year, there's about 500 deaths and 58 hospitalizations in children. You know, we don't want children to die of anything in this modern age with modern medicine, but there you have it. Now, older adults, these are usually people much older than me or Randy. There's about 100, this is over 65-year-old, 177,000 hospitalizations and 14 deaths a year because us old folks don't do as well. And there's been an interesting situation that happened when COVID hit. Now, this is a little chart here. That middle chart, you see the middle bump right there. That's the incidence of RSV pre-COVID. And then you see that it went away during COVID. And then this year, it hit November, December, it hit with a vengeance. And then boom, it was gone. It's gone totally. We were so afraid in November that this was going to take over and that people not only would die from COVID or maybe the flu, but also RSV, but it disappeared. Now, some of the mysteries of medicine we'll talk about toward the end here. Why did this happen? Aren't we glad it did? But you can see how scared you could be as if this was double or triple anything we'd seen in a number of years. Now, RSV does come and go, just like this, just like the flu, just like all these kinds of diseases we don't know what to do with. So would you say it's a miracle? Would you say it's just COVID took over, or is it just the luck of the draw? So we call it a tridemic, but we don't have to worry about RSV. As far as I can tell, it's gone till next fall. That's probably a good thing. Now, flu, influenza. Interestingly, the name influenza means coming from the stars. There's been flu as long as there's been recorded history. Nobody knew where it came from, but we've had it forever. And it seems to be something that happens in the late fall and winter, and then peters off in the spring, which helps us because the flu in Australia is the same flu we end up getting here. So they get the disease. We then fix our vaccines so that our vaccines match that strain of the flu. Looking at a 10-year incidence of flu, anywhere from 9 million to 41 million hospitalizations per year from the flu, predominantly in people over 65. Sorry, Randy. And about 35,000 deaths per year, usually from the effects of flu, which end up being pneumonia. That's why we have you get a flu shot, because it can make a big difference in preventing this. I hope you don't mind pictures of needles here. So flu can be very serious. But look what happened. You'll see here, the 2018-19 flu season was like any other. See that big bump? And then it goes away in the spring, and then boom, the 2019-20 flu season, 2020 flu season was pretty bad. Then when COVID hit, flu disappeared. There was no flu in 2021. I mean, none. Positivity rates below 1%, that doesn't even exist. So how could this happen? I mean, there's flu every year. There's bad years and good years, but there's never no years from flu. This is why I stayed in medicine and public health for 30 years, because not everything has an answer. And if you remember, that was a year we were very scared between COVID and flu, but it didn't happen. And then this year, flu hit with a vengeance in November. And here's a chart looking back through, I think, October, and it peaked right there. You'll see this is per week. You'll see it peaked in November and then early December. And by the time Christmas hit, flu was gone. That never happens. Usually it peaks over the holidays and it's terrible through mid-January. And then, well, it still could be bad in March. That's influenza B. But this is a chart as of January 24th, last week, in fact. This chart makes no sense for this early in the season. So we didn't have RSV, and we ended up not having the flu. I guess it's a good thing. And I'm also looking at the flu deaths. They're down to maybe 17,000 or lower. I mean, this is considered nothing in the flu world, nationwide. So let's talk about COVID. Oh, there I am before we had to wear surgical masks. I have double masks. I had my bandana too. I'm still suffering from PTSD from March of 2020. Many of you had to work from home. Schools were closed, so the kids could drive you crazy. Everyone had to wear masks. And in January 2021, we could get vaccine, the 2-dose regimen, 3 weeks apart, 4 weeks apart. Do you remember all that? How sick you could feel after that first dose? We thought the vaccine was going to save us. And then we'll talk about this. Then in the summer of 21, Delta, the variant called Delta hit, and all the numbers went back up. Then Delta went away in the fall, and between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the Omicron variant hit. Oh, we're never going to be done. Is COVID going to be like the flu? And the boosters. Now, I keep trying to count. I had the first two. I had 2 regular boosters, and then I got the bivalent booster. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I've had 5 COVID shots. Plus, thank you very much, Karen. I got COVID at the Toastmasters convention in August to add to that. So I feel like I'm as do as well as anybody, and even I got sick. Just about 120 of us out of the 700 people at the Toastmasters convention. And I know Valencia's been up with all the Toastmasters in Vegas. I hope you guys don't get sick from that. So let's look at some of the data. I love this chart because it goes back all the way to February 29th of 2020. So that was the first blip. You see that blip there? Right, probably May or June. And then we had a big blip. There's always blips around holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. That big blip in the middle, that was a year ago, January, when Omicron hit. Hospitals were filled up, COVID everywhere, and quite a few people, older people died. And then, boom, it went away, mostly. And you can see now at the very end there, these are 7-day averages. We thought the new variant, which is called XBB 1.5, is going to cause trouble. It's now the predominant strain, but people may be getting infected, but they're not getting sick from that. So you can see from this chart, and for those of you who don't believe in vaccines, clearly it's working. But I'm a Western medicine kind of guy. Others could say, well, it just ran its course. It's still with us, but I love this chart because it does show the reality. Now, the problem with cases is since we all have tested home and don't report cases, we need to look at different numbers. So I like to look at hospitalizations. Even though I'm retired, I still live and breathe this stuff with my colleagues back in Riverside. So this is a 7-day moving average of hospitalizations in United States. And if you look at this, you'll see how January in 21, we had that big peak right before the vaccines got hold of us. And then in January 22, that was a year ago, January, it was really bad again for hospitalizations. And now you saw just a little blip over the holidays here. And everyone expected to have a big incidence of it. Now, why is this? Why are the numbers lower? Well, approximately 80% of people in the United States are vaccinated. And well, not that many, maybe 25 to 30% had the first boosters. And we know that 15% got the bivalent booster, which specifically focuses on the Omicron variants B4 and B5. And then it turns out it's very effective against the new XBB 1.5. We didn't know that at the time. So is this vaccine related? But hospital admissions, you can't lie about those. Those are important. Now you can say, well, how many of those people are in the hospital for COVID? Well, yeah. But these are people in the hospital with COVID, whether they're there for COVID or not. Well, we can talk about that in a minute. And then deaths are deaths. There's a lot of controversy about deaths. If you die and you had COVID, did you die from the COVID? Well, you certainly didn't die from COVID before there was COVID. So I'd like to look at this as our deaths. And you can see here, look at 2020, there were a lot of deaths. And even in 21 and 22, there were a lot of deaths, but in 22, so look at this big drop the last year in deaths. And some people say, well, the vaccines don't work. And in fact, anyone here follow that wonderful governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis? He says that the bivalent booster causes you to get COVID. That's from his misunderstanding. When 80% of the population is vaccinated, who's going to get COVID? The people that are vaccinated. The beauty of having the boosters, though, I just looked this up yesterday, and a new study just out from the Centers for Disease Control looking at the first 3 months of that special Omicron-focused booster showed that it reduces symptomatic infection by 50% for most adults under 65. That's pretty good because if you've had COVID, that sore throat, that cold, the fever, you just feel terrible for those 5 days. And for those over 65, It reduces our symptomatic infections by 33%. Because we're older, nothing affects us. But look at that reduction in deaths. Now, California just reported yesterday, and looking last year, they had 30,000 more deaths than they expected in California. That's even accounting for COVID and RSV and flu, and they have no idea why. Is it opioid overdoses? Is it people that didn't get care because they were afraid they didn't go to their doctor's office? They didn't get treated for cancer? We don't know. But that's kind of scary just in California alone. 30,000 unexpected deaths that weren't from COVID. Wow. This is, again, public health is your whole lifelong journey, and you'll never know all the answers. So what happened? Now, some would say you can't have all those viruses in your body at the same time. You either have COVID or you have RSV or you have flu, and COVID seems to take over. I like that kind of idea of the different viruses fighting each other instead of me. Now, remember when we had masks and everyone wore masks and there was no flu that year? Could masks really work? Or maybe it's because the culture change of staying home when you're sick. Do you remember when we used to be tough? No matter how sick we were, we'd come to work and infect the whole office. At least we used to show how macho or how tough we were. Now you stay home when you're sick. Or maybe we know, in fact, this year, the flu vaccine exactly matched the H3N2 that was floating around, the version of flu that was going on in the United States. And maybe these COVID vaccines actually work. Take that, Ron DeSantis. But there has to be some explanation for why less people are dying. There's less hospitalizations, less flu. There has to be a reason that it's beyond just the luck of the draw. So as we end this little talk, some things don't change. I've never washed my hands as much in the last 2.5 years as I did in my whole life put together. But no doubt that washing your hands makes a big difference. So is staying home when you're sick. So you don't infect other people, which is the best thing. Hey, I'm a big believer in boosters. I'm a believer in getting shots. I now have to get shingles. I have to get my Pneumovax. Right? I got my flu shot. I got my COVID boost. I got 2 arms. Fill me full of all those vaccines. I'll live to be 100. Well, there is still this. I go to a lot of baseball games. They're outside. I haven't yet gone to basketball inside or a big concert indoors. That's a guaranteed way to get sick. And well, I told you in August, Toastmasters convention, 750 people there and 125 of us at least got COVID. That was a large indoor event. It wasn't even that large. Makes me wonder about how the Bahamas are going to work. Maybe we'll do everything outside on the veranda. And will these diseases never end? They'll never end. 1918 was the last humongous deadly flu. And we have the COVID. And maybe it's something we just have to live with. Now, this week, if you heard, the CDC expert panel is going to recommend that we get a COVID shot every fall, just like a flu shot. And it'll match all the boosters. They'll figure those out in the spring, sorry. They'll figure out which variants to touch. And then boom, maybe you'll get a COVID a COVID and flu vaccine. After all, people seem to get flu vaccine. Maybe 50% of us, especially those of us over 65, they have a special version for us because we need the double dose. And that can make a big difference. And think if that, because remember, maybe we still get COVID, but the symptoms are less and we don't get in the hospital. And then you can live a long life. And that probably is going to be the recommendation. But I'm also glad that there's no more restrictions. We don't have to wear masks anymore. Though probably when you're flying and when you're visiting medical facilities, you need to wear a mask. But staying home when you're sick and washing your hands may make the difference. This is ever changing. This is my 3rd talk to this group in the last 2.5 years about the COVID. And maybe in 6 months, 9 months, we'll know better what the next phase is going to be here. I still keep up with it all. I talk to the epidemiologists all the time because, well, that's me. I have a lot to say about a lot of things. I have a few extra minutes. Are there any questions from the audience before Marilyn cuts me off? I can't probably see you. Judy. Yes, Judy.
Michael, I want to ask you, have you heard about the theory that when a virus or bacteria comes along, it kills off the weak ones, and then whoever survive are the stronger ones that those bad guys, bad bugs can't conquer, and they
Oh.
give up.
So the Darwinian view of disease,
Yes, survival of the fittest.
because
So we
no
are the
disease
ones
will
that
kill-
left
right, so
standing.
Judy's, yeah, no disease will kill everyone, even smallpox. But does that mean that people should get smallpox or polio or measles? Yeah, that's not survival of the fittest. Who would be left, and why should we have people get sick? We all want to live long lives. We want to help people. We want to see the next generation come along. Oh, Judy, I don't have to tell you, but no, we can't live our lives that way. Marilyn has a question.
Yeah, I have a question on possibly because people stopped with the sanitation principles. You know, after about a year of, I mean, during the first event of the COVID, everybody was sanitizing everything in their hands or washing hands. Now we stopped. And so that's possibly why some of it came back. And I think maybe we might have a lot more in California right now because we have a lot of border people coming in that were not tested.
I think we have plenty of COVID here without blaming people at the border or immigrants
I know, but they also
or
got,
undocumented.
I don't know.
I do. I see people washing their hands still. Wash your hands. You don't have to clean. Remember, you don't have to sanitize your food. That's not really how COVID is spread.
Well, some
Flu
of
can
it.
be spread, and RSV can be spread that way as well. So
Sometimes
let's
you
not
do
blame
a lot of
others.
pesticides.
Let's not blame others. There's no need for that. And my time's about up. Maybe one more question. Anybody?
No problem.
Raise your hand because I can't see everybody.
I would like to make a comment, Michael.
Oh, please, Lois.
This has been a wonderful public service. Thank you so much. And your annual updates are fabulous. And so you have now put me back on the path of going forward with health and safety and new vigilance on the microorganisms that we can encounter out there, and bringing all the best practices together and keep us focused. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Wow, Lois.
This is well
Love
done.
it.
Thank you.
High praise.
It was well done.
And, well, and I'm a registered nurse.
I know.
This
Thank
is
you,
well
Speakers
done.
Bureau and
Thank you.
Tom Jameson, back to you.
Michael, as spoken as a true member of the debate club, by the way, that's debatable, my favorite Toastmaster experience of all of it. But anyway, as a good member of the debate club, being willing to take on those controversial topics, and then you've had some controversy from your audience, and so that was excellently done. I'm glad there was here. We made a comment about having legal representation in the room. We also have medical representation in the name of Diane Piella from Hawaii, who is one of our qualified speakers. So I won't actually call on her now, but if she has any questions or thoughts she'd like to add after our third speaker, we'll let her have a few comments along with anybody else, because I have a feeling we're going to have enough time to finish up well within our time frame. Our next speaker, it's so appropriate that he speak this evening, a few weeks after Martin Luther King's birthday, and this is the year of the 60th anniversary of the famous, we all know the quotation, "I have a dream" speech from Martin Luther King. But the first time I had the opportunity to hear Ralph do this, and Ralph is just amazing when it comes to being able to reproduce famous poems and stories, and in this case, the actual entire speech of the I Have a Dream speech from Washington, D.C. in 1963. First time I had a chance to hear it, he invited me to come out to a church where he was giving this, in which Connie and I were amongst that 5% of Anglo faces in the room. And I was just amazed. And of course, most speakers know lots of quotations, and this quotation is very special. That I have a very specific quotation, but to hear the entire speech, it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was just so moving to be there, to have this feeling that you were there in Washington, D.C. Oh, I have a cute story to tell. My daughter talked about her 8-year-old had just learned about Martin Luther King at school, and she wondered whether Grandma and Grandpa had been there. And she couldn't understand how we weren't there, because we were alive when he was speaking.
Right.
And I did have to be the story I will tell her, and let's see, well, yeah, if there were 1 million people in the room, there were 349 million who weren't there. So at least I don't feel quite so bad having missed the opportunity. But tonight, place yourself on the Mall in Washington, D.C. in 1963, at the times of the speech. And we had an interesting, was it Roger? You sent that to me, right? Somebody sent me something that had the person that came up after Martin Luther King's speech. And he didn't hide what he was saying to the people that brought him up. He said, who put together this order? How can I follow that? Which certainly would be in each of our hearts if we were called to be the next speaker. So now we call on our next speaker from 797, a person I have known for at least 15 years. And the story that I will say is that we sent him out to a Kiwanis club to give this speech. That happened in those 50 speakers that I have sent out. Got a 3-minute standing ovation by the Kiwanians. Our next speaker with the I Have a Dream speech, the Reverend Ralph Rivers.
Thank you. You had to have been there. I felt that I was right there listening to this speech in 1963 when I was in front of my television. It was a black and white television. And as I give this speech nowadays, I'm reminded that many of the people I'm speaking to weren't even born at the time of this speech. I really think that it's one of the greatest speeches ever recorded or uttered in American history. And it's appropriate to give it on this first day of Negro History Month. Now, it's popular now to call it Black History Month. Seems like we can't get it together about who we are. I've been called everything except a child of God. But today, I remember that moment, and I'm going to try to do my best to echo the words of this great man. He stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and he said these words. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves whose lives had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end their long night of captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still crippled by the chains of discrimination and the manacles of segregation. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on that promissory note insofar as citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we have come here today to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hoped that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I wish to say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on a high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied. As long as a Negro is a victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality, we can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing to vote for. No, we are not satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I'm not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom has left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the victims of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana, go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meanings of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with his vicious racist, with his governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and little white black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our society into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day we will be free. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we let freedom ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we'll be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestant and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Ralph. Another standing ovation from another audience. Thank you very much. I want to let you guys know that's something that Connie and I have a privilege to hear, because Ralph belongs to our Saturday morning club. So anytime people come to visit our Saturday morning club, you get a chance to see and hear Ralph. Last time we heard that was just last Saturday. We heard him do that again. And on our way home, we talked about, Connie and I, with 90 plus years of Toastmasters, thought, even if someone wasn't interested in the topic, but you're interested in becoming a better speaker, to analyze exactly, it was like, how would you like to be the evaluator? Right? The person that gave that quiz, right? That was the speech I gave a long time ago about the evaluator that evaluated the worst speaker I ever gave it. But to analyze it from the perspective of how it's written, how it's put together, the pacing, the use of threes, and all those techniques that we try to have you learn about in Toastmasters, it's just really a great part of that. So I want to thank you. By the way, I forgot to mention the DTM and a qualified speaker, and all of our presenters today for coming in here, giving us an example of what it takes to become a qualified speaker. And I brag about this a lot, but one of the things that's most important to me about our group of qualified speakers is they're not cookie cutters. They're not all the same. They each bring different talents and skills, and they each bring something worth sharing with an audience that we can send them out to. I promised that we're going to have plenty of time to end early, so I don't know whether any of our speakers would have any questions, or anyone have any questions for any of our speakers, but I did mention that we might have our medical doctor, who's one of our qualified speakers. Diane, do you have any comments about, especially about Michael's or anybody else's speech?
And I think it was such a stupendous evening. I'm so proud of all of our speakers. I happened to invite a lady who works at Loma Linda at the VA hospital tonight because she's thinking about becoming a Toastmaster. And I told her that tonight she will see really the best of the best that we have. And it really did not disappoint. Wonderful evening. I want to thank all of our speakers. Very, very touching. You guys are just wonderful. As far as Michael, yes, I loved your talk. I wish the whole country could hear your talk. Actually, put it on Facebook, put it everywhere. Medicine and science. We're so used to looking back on medicine, it's changed so much, and we're so used to just taking a pill or just doing a test and having the answer to everything. And medicine did not evolve that way, and that's what people don't understand now. It was trial and error, basically, a lot of it. And you wouldn't have been able to do this whole presentation tonight without retrospect and looking back and learning all that you did. So yes, medicine does change, science does change, and it was a great presentation. So thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Diane. I couldn't help but think that we inspire you, we educate you, we entertain you, and we even try to save your life. Thank you, Michael. Any other questions for any of our speakers? Oh, I see Marilyn has a hand up, and
I want to add something to, I'm not really adding it to Martin Luther King because that was a wonderful speech, but someday we will all be able to hold hands as the real human race and as Toastmasters.
right, getting back in person and be able to hold hands again. Right.
No, but
I do want to mention
the
someone in the
world will be
audience.
Toastmasters.
I just want to mention Roxanne Anderson has been going through some health issues, and I'm glad that she was able to make it here. Do you have any comments for us? One of our qualified speakers and member of 1348. You're muted, I think, yet, so.
I was just saying,
There she is.
it's great to see all of your faces, and it was a great meeting. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, well, do we have any other comments? Let's see if we have any of our district leaders. I'd like to have, if
Jack
someone
has-
is here and he has a comment.
Tom, Jack.
I see Greg's hand. Okay, go ahead.
I couldn't have seen a better television night than this one. It was well worth it to turn off. And thank you for all the speakers for showing up, suiting up, and giving us answers to our questions that we didn't know we had.
Joyce? Roger?
She is, so you don't miss out. Do we have Dr. Valencia? Are you here? And Melissa? Melissa was here. I know she wanted to hear, specifically to be able to hear Ralph's speech.
Yes.
Jack and Roger. Okay, I don't see everybody here on the screen, so.
Hi, Tom.
Roger. Okay, Jack, I guess.
Can
We
you
have
hear
time,
me?
so we're not worried.
Mr. Jamison, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we got you now, Dr. Valencia.
How are you doing? On behalf of the trio, I just want to say thank you to everyone that attended tonight. We thoroughly enjoyed the phenomenal speeches and the presentations that were given tonight. Please check your District 12 news as there's so many happenings that are going on. And I bring you greetings from the Toastmasters mid-year conference in Las Vegas.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you're here. We always try to make sure that our district leaders get a chance to lead us at these meetings and so give us their direction and suggestions for what's important right now. And I don't know, is Melissa still there? Give her a chance. We don't get to see Melissa lately too much, but she's busy with a major project.
What I would say on behalf of Miss Melissa is please have your club. Are you able to hear me? I hear a little bit of echo.
Yep, we heard you.
I would say on behalf of Melissa, she probably would encourage you to have your speech contest within your clubs and then prepare for the contests that are going on. And if we have any Toastmasters that would like to be COT trained, please check the district news for COT training.
Yes, we have contests coming up, right? We have table topics and international.
Roger and John.
Okay, Roger. Okay, Roger. And then Jack.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. I just wanted to say that I have long studied the speech that Ralph gave, both the era and the speechcraft that's gone into it. And it's very moving to have somebody give it live. I have to say, I'm glad that he's keeping that speech in the forefront, because YouTube is great, but having somebody give it live gives it such vitality. Thank you.
Okay, and Jack Brennan next.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, we
This is
can.
This is Mr. Mosier. Can you give any a feeling or opinion why all this became so what I call donkey-like and elephant-like? Over what caused that? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but why did it become so political so fast? My only thought would be is Americans want their freedom above everything. And I always said, if you remember when SARS came out, and in Canada, they shut down that neighborhood, they made people stay in their homes, and we all said this could never happen in America because we just have different principles and we live it's a different culture. I'm trying to, and we also can disagree with each other and not hate each other for it. And I would like to think that science has all the answers. You heard from Diana, and we do not have all the answers. And then people then say, then you don't know what you're talking about. It's okay. It's a big country. And maybe it is, maybe Judy's right and it'll be survival of the fittest. I don't try to. This is why we stay in our, I stay a forever student of the health issues in our country.
Thank you.
That's why we brag so much about debate club, because we can take diametrically, even if you don't know what side you're going to be on, diametrically opposed positions on extremely controversial issues. And we walk out still front. So that's any other hands up. Somebody in my audience might have to help me. I better let her answer my. You can come up here.
Well, very short.
Very short.
Tom and I very much enjoy being members of Club 797, Saturday Morning Toastmasters. And we tell people that it is probably the most diverse group in the whole district, as far as race, as far as age, background, the amount of time they've been in the particular club. Ralph gave his speech last Saturday. We had a nice full house listening, and he received a standing ovation for that. One of our members, Laura Kinder, made a statement that I thought was very special. She said, wouldn't it be wonderful if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. could be with us last Saturday morning and see our group and see what's happened since the time that that speech was first delivered.
Yeah.
And when Connie said that, I said, if you have faith, he did.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent program. If I do say so myself, next month we will be meeting, believe it or not, on the 1st again, very 1st of March. We have, as I said, each of the next 3 months, we do have someone who has spoken up to to give their qualifying speech. And as I said, we do have room for that. And if you are a qualified speaker and you have a presentation you would like to put into one of those months, we may still be able to do that. So let me know about that too. It's a good program to have. I don't like to have more than 2 people going for a qualified speech during a month, because we should have other program too. But if you have people that are willing to do that, we will work with them and get them involved. And if you are a qualified speaker and you have a presentation that you would like to present, let me know about that, and we will see how things work into the schedule. Any other questions before we let you go home early? Always my goal when I was teaching, I wanted to let everybody go home early so I could go home early once in a while. Okay. Oh yes, Connie, one more.
You might note that,
Oh, we got our drawing too.
But also, we might be putting out a call for a possible future program of
Right.
authors.
Right. We're gonna. Yeah, we have a number of people who have been either involved, wrote a book or something like that, or we're in the process where they learned about trying to publish and so on. And maybe even just people have read a book like me. I remember reading a book once. And anyway, with that, if you were a participant in writing a book, please contact, especially Connie, she's putting that together. So, okay, so I need to have some numbers. And if you can, I'm going to take note of who picks up the female brain and who picks up secrets that every woman should know. Marcia, I need your phone number, and it's okay. My wife's even here. I need your phone number because I was going to bug you because I want you to be going for your qualified speaker one of these days. So, okay. She says she will. Everybody heard that. It's written down. You have to give me your months. Okay, I have to have 6 numbers. Just give me. We'll order them in order so that we can read them off. Just put them all. I'll do them. That's right. Order them. And okay, here we go. We have them in order. Let's take those off the way. Here are the numbers. I will read them off about 3 times, but I will read them off and start writing up here because the meeting is officially adjourned, except for the handing out of the booty for those rewarding those people for coming here. The last 3 numbers are 0, 3, 7, 0, 3, 9, 0, 4, 0, 0, 4, 1, 0, 4, 2, and 0, 4, 6. So 37, 37, 39, 40, 41, 42, and 46. Okay.
Oh, you need the ticket. You need proof.
I trust you. I know you guys are.
Here we go.
Okay, just pick your poison.
Let me have the
You first,
t-shirt.
sir.
Let me have the shirt.
The shirt. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
These are CDs?
That's the CDs, yeah.